Hey, it's Joe, and I'm here with my friend Bill Marsden from
Hey,
Unitive Design. What's the A?
it's Unitive Design and Analysis Limited. I can't even say it. I don't know why I gave the company that name.
And
Unitive Design.
what's that all about?
Well, I'm not sure anybody's actually got this, but the whole point about Unitive Design, which is kind of where we're going today, is about bringing stuff together, right? It's about uniting stuff, which we have to do when we want to make something compliant, which is why we're here today talking about design for compliance.
That was a beautiful introduction. Teach us about design for compliance.
Okay, well, maybe it's good to start with what I actually do,
What do you
or what
actually
my company.
do?
Sorry,
That's my first question. What do you actually do?
what do we actually do? Yeah. So I'm a nerd. I have a PhD in physics. Half of my team have PhDs. I've got another guy who's studying for PhD. That's not a requirement for what we do. But we get involved, and this is kind of the key thing, we get involved in projects super early. And kind of, yeah, I guess the comedy is that we get involved when things are still science projects, when medical devices are, somebody comes to me and says, I have made a medical device. Look, it's got a screen and it's got a widget and a hole. And I go, guys, that's not a medical device. That's a science project. So that's kind of where we get, that's where we kick off, and we start straight away in figuring out that pathway. And a lot of the time, the devices they'll not perform, they will not be suitable for the use case environment. If I give an example, so a surgical tool has a lot of different stakeholders. There are nurses, surgeons, people who prep the theatre, people who calibrate, people who are going to perform quality control on devices before they even get anywhere near the theatre. And all of that has to be taken into account when you design the device. So we get involved. I mean, and people say, oh, yeah, we'll get you involved at the end. It's like, no, I'm not interested then.
I would
It's
think
too late.
that design would be the first thing.
Well, design, so we do electronics and we do optical systems, imaging systems. Most electronics engineers think that design is, drawing your schematic with your resistors, your capacitors, your diodes, amplifiers. But we can do that, but we get involved at a much higher level. So we're system designers, and that's what unitive design is all about. It's about pulling in all of the different things. So stuff that's outside of our comfort zone, even like human factors. That's not my comfort zone, but I know a lot of really good. I mean, this network that you have, Joe. This MedDev network is great for this. There's all of these experts, and we rely on these people all the time
Have you
to tell us.
you become acquainted with Shannon Clark?
Uh, I I think we may have been on a
You gotta get
call.
more involved. She's my go-to for human factors.
Yeah, yeah. I have somebody in the UK actually who Miranda Newbury. There you go. I'm going to name Miranda, who's really good and works really well with us, because actually that's the technical part of this, in my opinion, is the easy part. It's
Well, that's what
bringing
you do.
it right, but it's bringing it all together. That's the thing. That's the key to success, right?
So
And
let me I enjoyed the cadence of our conversation. I want to really narrow in on something that I'm quite unclear about. You called today's talk Design for Compliance. And when I hear the word design, I think I don't have a mug until someone draws something. That's
yeah,
designing to me. And you say, no, that's the design part, but I come in later typically. Why aren't you their design agency?
okay, no. So what I was actually saying is that people ask us to come in later. after they've done the kind of what they think. So here's a circuit design. Some of your some of your listeners will be quite familiar with that. So that's kind of the design part. But there's so much more that's come in before that, where we've decided on, what the power requirements are going to be, and we're going to maybe touch on this later, but the standards.
Is this like the design of the guts with the electricity? Is that?
It's everything. This is just one small part. This is okay. I brought some props. That's that thing, right? That's electronics. That's what electronics looks like. But that is just such a small part of the design. It's everything from how it's going to be used. So this thing here has got a little touch screen on it. So just even like the size of the buttons on this thing is absolutely key to making this usable. If the buttons were too small, it would be a completely useless design, even if the things inside it were absolutely groundbreaking. So most of what we do is actually just drawing block diagrams like Lego.
We have our friend Rick Stockton on the line who wrote to me, it's like design for manufacturer. We get called in later exactly like a project I'm now working on.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Hey, Phil, it's the same thing Phil was talking about. Somebody has this thing and it works, and they've either figured out how to build exactly one, or it's kind of a mess, but it does actually do the function, but you could never actually use it clinically. You could never afford to make it, and it might not be safe. And in Phil's case, it might not comply with any regulations at all. And so a lot of things have to be done to it. But before that device was invented, there was no way to do X. And so the guys who really just changed the world come up with a way to do X and a brand new way to do it, but they don't have a way to make it manufacturable, or they don't have a way to make sure that it'll be safe and compliant with FDA or CE regulations. And so that's when they'll bring us in. Now, would it be ideal to bring us in on the beginning? Absolutely. But would it be economical? Probably not, since maybe 1 out of 20 of these devices ever turns into something that they could use. Would we like to be in from the beginning? And would it be more economical for that one device? Virtually every time. So yeah, that's the summary.
People add costs as soon as they add consultants. Probably that's why they wait until it's probably a pound wise, penny foolish kind of thing, or pence foolish.
Yeah, it's a false economy. I mean, sometimes it pays off. Sometimes if they've got a device that it's kind of on the trajectory, it needs a bit of a nudge, and then you can get it to compliance. But the times when I really cry are when you get something they say, okay, right now, here's the thing, let's CE mark it, or let's get this approved by the FDA. And I have to go, guys, we've got to take this design apart and start from the beginning. And they go, oh, it's not possible. Yeah, sorry, that's it. Unless you redesign this thing will never satisfy EMC. This thing will never satisfy the power requirements. It will not satisfy the earthing requirements in an operating theatre. It will not satisfy biocompatibility, sterilizability. As you just said, Rick, the cost of goods is. I'm working on a project now. Thankfully, this is not a product. It's a European project where we've got a device. The target price point is €6,000, and we've got a component in there that's €5,500. It's a laser. You're never going to get cost down. You've got to think of another way of doing it, and that is just so frustrating from our perspective.
Mark Fine, who I elevated to panelist too, he's not shown himself yet, wrote, as you know, Joe, COGS should also be evaluated early on in the process. There's his chest. There's his face.
Hey, Mark.
Let me unmute. So I think I've captured your thought there, and thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Thomas, we appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly think about, although we get involved like super early, we're already thinking about cost of goods. My our strength is not really the analysis, the design for manufacture. It's before that. It's really the design for compliance, knowing how that thing's going to get to market. But there's a transition period, right? As we're doing the early feasibility and we're finding what components, we can typically produce a list of the possible components, and then I will hand over to a lot of our clients do contract manufacturing. So then it's quite nice for us to transfer that to the contract manufacturer, so they can look at the supply chain, they can look at all of the
As you know, this is not my area at all. I used to think of, design and development, and I would need someone to lead design and development. But I'm hearing design for compliance, design for manufacture, and there's probably design for this and design for that. If I'm a surgeon and I have this great idea for a device, who should I hire first? Who is this designer? Is there a design firm that I hire because they do all design? And does that by definition mean that they have to be a big design firm, which means it's probably out of my budget? Do I just bring on Rick, or do I just bring on Fit? Where does it start, and when do you bring the other people in? Because we've got the bots, but then we've got the electronics in there, and I'm clueless. Help me figure this out.
Yeah, and I don't know how it works in the US, but in the UK you sort of have two choices. We've got some big design consultancies. There are something like 5, and there are companies like Sagentia who are multinationals, and you can hire those people, but they tend to come with a huge overhead and
Yeah, no, I get it.
And then there's sort of clusters of people like us, and I sort of hinted at that before, that we know people who are good at looking at the regulatory pathway, looking at quality if you're going to start designing some of the stuff in house, and there's lots of small companies. Something like 55% of the medical device companies in the UK are sub 10 people. And we have quite a good network, and we pull in the people as and when. And that's relatively economic, actually, but maybe harder to manage. So pros and cons.
Yeah, I get it. I wouldn't know how to guide someone if they said, "Hey, Joe, do you need a designer?" How am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah, I think that's actually very hard, and I don't know what the other panelists think about this, but what we find in Europe is that people have there's a training stroke education that's required. So let's take a surgeon. So we get this reasonably often. People come to us and say, somebody, I've been trying this thing in the operating theatre, it doesn't work. So we need to design a widget to do it. So can you produce that in 6 months and get that thing CE marked? And the answer is no. Just no. We're not going to be able to do it in 6 months, because here are all the steps. Here are all the hurdles through which you have to walk, and here are the people you need. I can't do the regulatory pathway. You're going to need a regulatory expert. I can't do the manufacturing. You're going to need Greg or Mark. But people think you can just a couple of contractors and we'll get this thing done. I don't know. Maybe the others have an opinion of what that's like in the US.
I've invited Joanne, Alan, and York to show themselves if they like, because they've all got comments here.
Sorry, let me show myself.
Show yourself.
Yeah, so obviously we deal with all these exact same problems, and have been. This has been my career for 25 years. A lot of it has to do with the experience of the customer, people who have the new ideas, a doctor, for example. We typically, and I'll just be straightforward, I love doctors. That's where a lot of the innovation really happens. Yeah. But as far as building a business and bringing a product to market, they're usually not a good customer for us, just because of the inexperience in terms of commercialization and everything else that goes with it. But we have, a pretty holistic system. We're very vertically integrated. We do, electrical, industrial design, human factors, mechanical, and all prototyping in-house. we can't do the regulatory. You definitely need a regulatory expert to guide you and create something unique to your product. And all this is, yeah, it's very expensive, and we counsel a lot of people away, actually. I have a situation right now with the doctor who has an idea that we counseled them and encouraged them not to pursue this product, and they proceeded anyway. And now they're saying, wow, this is really expensive. And I said, well, you haven't even spent a fraction of what it's going to take you to get to market. And this is all an eye-opening education, and so it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is you kind of do, you can spend an hour with somebody and you explain the process, you explain the milestones along the way, and you say, okay, by the time your company's grown to, you're just finishing off your product design, you're probably doing $1 million in salaries, right, at that point. So integrate that over 6 to 10 years, depending on the complexity of your product.
Yeah, we try to differentiate inventors from business people who've done this before, because inventors, they don't like to license. They just think that they just see, this could generate $1 million in sales, and they think that equals $1 million in their pocket, which it does not, right? It's the profit on $1 million, which may be zero or a very small percentage. So these are just general business things that took us a long time to learn, and we have average tenure here of 16 years in our small company. This is all stuff that we've learned over 35 years of doing business. It's not something that you're going to learn in one day.
See that, Phil? I told you we'd fill our little screen with smiling faces. I didn't know it would be 6 white men, but we take what we get.
Hey, we're not diverse. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a white man. There's another white man from Europe. What do you have to say, Luke?
Well, Phil told us about where to start, and usually where a great idea starts, like when a surgeon has a great idea, is to get a partner to validate that idea, and usually universities are good for that. You can get a subsidy grant to investigate that kind of stuff, and after that you have to find a bag of money to develop the thing. And usually the best partner for that is someone with great deep pockets who already knows how to do that, and already knows how much money it will take to get it to market.
Yeah, but I don't know what your experience is, Luke, but often people think that the thing that they've got has a lot more value, and I think you hinted at that. They think they've got a lot of value in the device as it stands at the very early prototype. So after you validated it within the university, it's like, right, now I can sell this thing. I can get GE, Siemens, whoever to acquire us or acquire that license, and I'll sell it for $1 million. Let's keep putting $1 million on the table. And
if you have the right developer, you can explain how long that path will be. That it will take usually a few years to get to market, and know what the prices of the steps are that you have to take.
Yeah.
Robin,
well, they haven't got much.
To let us know that. Sorry, Robin wanted to let us know that there were more than just white men on the call.
Hey, Robin.
What's going on with you, Robin? Anything to report?
Oh, just getting over the shock.
No one else knows what you're talking about.
Oh, well, I got laid off yesterday.
Oh, no.
So it was after 13 years of working in marketing, actually learning some of what you're talking about, Phil, because I worked for Master Control. They laid off 10% of the workforce yesterday. So I'm looking for a job.
Did they say that did they associate it with COVID?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
It's convenient.
Well, just a thought is my previous company just signed up with Master Control and they have no idea how to use it. I think there's a huge opportunity for you to consult with folks like that who just need help, integrating it and making it work and customizing it and stuff like that. And, if you put yourself out there as an expert, just a thought.
Oh, thank you, Mark. And if I knew how to really run the software that well, I would. But I work in marketing, and they didn't let us. We didn't eat our own dog food. We just wrote about it. So, I would love to be able to help you, but there are better people than I who didn't get laid off who will be there to help you.
Well, we've just announced that to our whole network, and anyone who can help Robin, I know that she will appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And I do appreciate you, Joe, because I know you're suffering sort of the same thing.
Well, not quite, but yeah, it's COVID. I suspect everyone on the phone's economics have taken a bit of a hit on account of it. I'm going to bring Jonathan on because he says that he wants to hear about the user journey into design for compliance versus design for success. So let me add him. So Phil, can you talk about that?
Sorry, the user journey of design for compliance versus design for
success.
Design for success. Okay. Well, I think arguably they're the same thing. Just yeah, if you're not compliant, you're not going to be successful. But I guess the reverse is not true. So in terms of, I think I hinted at this earlier. I've worked on products, and in fact, this was before this was actually when I was an employee. I won't say, you have to look at my history to find out who it might have been. Of working on a product and trying to launch that product when it just was not compliant, and that product failed badly, and it cost the company a lot. And if we'd actually just stopped and done, gone through the hurdles, the thing that, and this is not the reason, but the thing that I see time and time again from an electronics perspective is EMC. People designing products that you spend 3 years designing it, you go to the test house, you spend your $1,500 and it fails. And everybody's sort of standing around looking at each other. You've all got egg on your face, and it's like, should we not have maybe thought about this before? And it's those iterative loops. And I'll give you a stupid example. So a lot of products have Ethernet, the same Ethernet connection that you have in your back of your computer. And Ethernet is notorious, especially gigabit Ethernet, at emitting radio frequency signals. And if you've got an Ethernet device, if you've got an imager with an Ethernet port on the back, you want to pay special attention to that to make sure that thing is encapsulated, or there are electronics techniques, a bit nerdy, but where you can get around that. And if you don't do it and you fail, you're going to spend the next 8 weeks respinning that board, and it's going to cost you, I don't know, what's 10K, 50K, and the time. So that's 6 weeks, and then you've got to requalify it. So there's another maybe 2 or 3 months before you get on the market. And
so Phil, that makes me think that you work a lot with the IP strategy as well, because it sounds like there's a lot of pitfalls that could be designed to force other companies who are competing with that company to fall into those traps and have to do more expensive solutions to get around those things. I'll give you an example. Something I did, we had a neurostimulator that we had just a simple spring mechanism that wouldn't allow the device to be plugged into the wall, into the main. And that spring would push out a pin, so you wouldn't be able to put the plug in while it was being used, and vice versa. So it forced all the other. We could use a simple plug for 50 cents or 80 cents, and all the other companies had to use a plug for $20. because it had to have special circuits and all sorts of other things. So love to hear more about how you work also with IP and coordinate from design perspective.
Yeah, I rarely come across that. I'm usually on the other side. So because we get involved so early on in the development, so typically somebody comes to us with a concept or a very rough prototype. And one of the things we do is to look at the IP landscape and try and work out what technologies. So we're kind of trying to work around the IP that's already in that space. So we do that. And often we'll be looking for equivalent technologies that haven't been specifically named on patents or are not, sort of new in the prior art domain. I guess that's where we get more involved in that. But yeah, I mean, it's part of the game. And even, yeah, I mean, we produced a number of products, or sorry, we have not products, prototypes for that have bypassed existing, used equivalent technologies, but not the same.
Are you seeing more and more integration of teams like, cost control, IP, design, user experience, marketing? Are the companies getting in earlier with the small teams and then letting them go out to do their thing and then come back together?
I guess in recent years, so for the last sort of like 7 years, which is the age of this business, we've been working mostly with small companies, so they haven't had that kind of employee population. Historically, when I've worked in big medical device companies, the integration was awful, and I think at the I forgot what it was called now, Joe, the conference that you ran in London. We heard that there was from Hologic, we heard how they're really trying to integrate that much better across the business. Specifically the regulatory and marketing are the two areas which seem to not talk to each other but are constantly fighting with each other. And I've certainly seen that in some of the large med dev companies I've worked.
Jose, tell us what you do and how it is similar and different to what Phil does.
Sure. Hey guys, Jose Borcas. I run a product development firm called BoldType. We specialize in connected wireless medical devices. It's about a 30-person group. And, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I think it's actually a similar mentality with usability, compliance, regulatory pathway, the whole 9 yards. You want to figure out early on what are going to be your risk factors. How can you de-risk those as early as possible? Whether it be usability, you're going to have certain assumptions about how people are going to use your product. How do you assess that, right? Can you build a simple prototype that just kind of looks like the thing and put it in front of users? Same thing with EMC, biocompatibility. How early can you look at, the data sheets of those products? Do they already have some sort of biocompatibility profile available with EMC? Can you get, like you said, people try to go to the test house when they think the product's ready. You don't have to do that. When you get the board, take it to the test house that day, schedule 4 hours for $1,000, sit there, send your engineer to sit there and actually tweak things while they're in the cage, so they can look at where the sensitivity is for that sort of thing. So, agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think the key there is try to get in early, whether it's in front of users, whether it's in front of test houses. Just figure out what are going to be your risk factors. But that does require quite a bit of experience. And to what some of the various people on the call have said, you've got different types of clients with different levels of expertise and sophistication on this. Medical device product development is complex, particularly when it's products that are, have electronics, mechanical, software, cloud, cybersecurity. That's a new one that's becoming more and more important today. And if you're developing a product, you're sending data wirelessly, it's going to the cloud. What are your requirements around that? How do you make sure that you don't end up exposing people's personal information? How do you make sure that the product doesn't get hacked and the person gets injured? So there is a lot to think about. I'm a big fan of groups like the ones that are here that really specialize in product development versus particularly for some of the smaller companies trying to go at it alone, build out their own teams. Sometimes it's just they're going to spend so much effort. They think they're saving money maybe, but really they're just setting themselves up for failure because there's so much risk in building a team, building the culture, building the systems, building the process, and then scraping your knees through that initial effort. I've really become a believer, just like how maybe 30 years ago, a lot of companies try to manufacture their own products and eventually they realize they're better off hiring contract manufacturers. I do think the market has moved more and more toward realizing that developing your own products seems attractive, but there's people who that's all they do. They do 10 products a year, so they've just borrow their scar tissue, right? Like they've already been through the pain. Leverage that to your advantage to get your product to market faster.
Yeah. What's your?
Well, you talked about EMC being the culprit in many times, but at least you can get pre-compliance testing for that quite easily. And for other stuff like mechanical, biocompatibility, risk management, how do you do a pre-compliance test for that?
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And maybe touch on what Jose was just saying. I just feel like we're spending so much time on stupid shit, or my clients are spending so much time on the stupid stuff, that the kind of complex stuff that Jonathan was talking about, IP blocking, that's just so, they're so buried in the problems that they've got. And yes, so take cytotoxicity, which is a good, for something that's got to be for a surgical device. That's something that's extraordinarily expensive, and you typically need. You don't want to put all the components into the cell test. You probably want to put the final product, but that means you've got to do a lot of background research to find out what materials are going in there, where those materials have been used previously. And I spend a lot of time with my clients going, guys, don't try and reinvent the wheel. It's exactly what you were saying, Jose. Don't try and manufacture it yourself. Don't try and use, unless you've got to use new technology, just use existing things. Change the critical part. Change the bit that's going to make the performance difference. That's going to impact the bottom line. Is going to get your sales. Because if you design the thing from the ground up, chances are you're going to trip up and fail one of these one of these compliance requirements. And biocompatibility is a good one. Find out what your competitors are using to encapsulate, to passivate the devices. Don't spend weeks looking at the chemical data. It's madness. And these are the shortcuts. These are the things that will enable you to get. So I've forgotten who asked about design for success now, but these are the people who, this is how you get the design for success. These are not shortcuts. These are as you said, Jose, it's let them feel the pain, let others get the scars, and stand on the shoulders and get to your end goal as soon as possible.
As free-flowing as I am when I'm thinking about copy and the like, right now I'm really trying to be linear to answer a question that I still have, which is, where do I start? Because, like I said before, design and development, I need to have somebody make this thing. That's it. That's where my brain is. And we're getting all this design for this, design for that. There's the electronic, there's the software, there's the mechanical. Where do I start? Who do I call first? And I don't feel as though I have an answer to that question.
I think there's a few of us here on the screen who you can call. And
I know that I can ask you and you would say, no, call Jose. I get that. But someone who doesn't have the benefit of my network, who's just like, I have an idea, which design concept, because it's not just you need a designer. You need special kind of designer. And your talk today is about compliance. So is that the first checkbox? Is manufacture the first checkbox? What is the first check? If you don't blank, then you have nothing. There just seems to be so many of these in medical. I would say if you don't have a concept that appeals to the customer, you have no concept. Oh, okay, marketing's first. No, if you don't have quality and you're going to kill, okay, well that's, if you don't have IP that can be, okay. So it's like everything, it's like you start and it's
not linear.
Flat, and it's everything you need to have before you start. And I'm like, well, how is that practical? There has to be some order. And
it depends on the device. So I think you can probably start with any of us on the screen today. And because we've all got those scars from over the years, and we can say, okay, where are you? Where's your technology? What are the risks? What would be the commercialization pathway? How much time do we think that's going to take And people like us are able to then look within our networks and say, okay, you're going to need this. You're going to need this person. Okay, here there's a cloud uplink that's got to be secure. It's patient data. It's not going to be anonymized. So you need Jose, or those are the kinds of. But it's different. It's different for every device.
I've invited Mike Dolphin to come on screen for a couple of reasons. One, I like him. Two, because he's not been on one of our calls yet, so I want him to introduce himself. And three, because he's a manufacturer and he's coming to market with something brand new. And Mike, do you have a webcam? There you go.
Yeah, I do. I'm I didn't shower yet this morning, but there you go.
What so few of us do these days. It's cool.
But I mean, my hair's doing a little thing, but yeah, it's kind of funny. We kind of did things the hard way. We started with a company and an idea, and we thought this will be easy. Fortunately, it didn't have any electronics in it, so I fully understand and appreciate how difficult electronics can be. But our device was mechanical, so we avoided a lot of that headache. But so we developed a mechanical device and spent a number of years making it. But we did fall into some of those pitfalls, right? Like we thought, the big pitfall for us, and this is a stupid story, but it's kind of a lessons learned, was we had a lure connection, so it's connected between syringes and needles. It's a standard lure connection, and we were not manufacturers. So we hired a company to do the manufacturing. We figured, they'll take care of the dimensions for us. Well, they didn't, and so it turned out that our lure connector was 30 microns too large. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's bigger than the specification that the ISO standard is, and so the FDA actually rejected our device based on that. So we had to, even though it works really well, even though it meets all the performance metrics, it doesn't meet the dimension metrics, and that was just one of those things where it's like, we really could have got that right at the very beginning. Had we taken it on as something, we said, let's get this right from the very start. And it kind of goes back to your question, Joe, is like, where do you start? Do you start with compliance to the standards? Do you start with the function design? You kind of have to do all of it at once. We designed our device, but then we said, okay, let's put this in front of potential users, and they had a whole bunch of ideas that were different than what we had, and we had to change our device significantly. And thank God we did that early. But you have to kind of like, does it make it function? You have to have users. You have to have compliant materials. You have to have a sterilization path. You have to have all those things, and then at the same time you have to meet the standards. You have to comply to the standards that are out there, and so you're going to pass all those tests. Ideally, I think the lesson I'm trying to take from all that is when you're doing your testing for approval at the very end of your sort of project cycle, development cycle, you want to already know that you're going to pass all those tests. You don't want to be going into those tests saying, gee, I wonder if we're going to pass this test. Yeah. Or we should pass this one. This is easy. How hard can that be? And then be like, well, we never tested it before. So you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised the tests you're going to fail.
Mike,
so test things early as much as you can.
For the group, what are you making, and do you happen to have a prototype within reach you could show us, or no?
Not within reach, but if you give me a few minutes, I can go get one. But it's just a basic switching device. The first device we made was a basic switching device for 2 syringes attached to 1 needle. So it's kind of like a stopcock, but it's shaped differently, and it's designed for doing knee injections. And so it's a fairly simple device. It shouldn't. You would think it wouldn't take that long to make and develop, but it still took a few years.
Andre, you gave a knowing nod when he told about 30 microns, and he wrote me and said not to be too self-promoting, but call me first. Why should we call you first?
Well, I appreciate everything that everybody said, but candidly, and this is a little bit of a commercial. We looked at this, and that's exactly what we've been providing. It's kind of a start to finish service whereby we are a medical device. We're FDA registered medical device manufacturer, but we also provide full design, regulatory, clinical testing services to a certain level, and then we'll bring people in for specialties. So we start with the design inputs with our clients. We ask them to give us really detailed design inputs. We then go through the phases and we explain to them the whole process, and then they understand what's involved. And it could be 6 months, it could be a 2-year process. And then if we have certain items where we require specialties, we'll bring in, for example, although I have mechanical, electrical, software engineers on staff, we will bring in specialists, let's say in optics, or we might bring in an FDA consultant regarding a PMA filing. We handle 510Ks, but we'll bring in somebody in regulatory. So we augment our on-staff people with consultants, but at the same time, we give a complete roadmap of bringing the device. In fact, it's our term. It's from concept to quantity, where we go from the conceptual stage right through the production stage. And we are a manufacturer here of Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3, as well as ISO 13485. So, everything that everybody said, I fully agree with. And that's why I said self-serving. You might want to start with us because we give that full range package and then bring in the people that can augment our team.
I have 3 things I want to interject so we can continue. One is Jan wrote that she gets called in because people forget they need to ship, sterilize, warehouse, and package a product. So wave to us, Jan, and thank you for telling us. Second is, I would love it if everyone on the call were to ping me later today with if somebody said, I'm coming to market or I want to develop a medical device, what would be the first thing you told them? And it'll be very interesting to hear from each of your perspectives and stay within your discipline. So, you might agree that marketing is it, but I'll handle that one. Jose, you do it. Andre, you do it. Jan, you do it. And then let's go back to Phil. You're guiding us, and this is the way these free-flowing conversations go. Design for compliance is the topic for today. Andre just said, well, ask us anything. Okay. Would you ever, Phil, be the first person to call, and in what case, and how would that, would it be someone like an Andre to say, I need someone like Phil for this? Or is Phil the first person to call when you something? I'm just, again, I keep coming back to this, where do I start? Because I get it. If it's something complex and electronic and circuit boards and the like, call Phil. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, we more often than not get, we were talking about surgeons, we talk about academics. We get a lot of these very blue skies kind of mad ideas. And I play a lot of whack-a-mole, right? People put the stuff on the table and I go, yeah, this is an interesting thing, or no, just no. And then no for various reasons. It can be financial, it can be compliance, because I think you'll never get the thing into a real environment, or it could be technical, that you need to make this thing out of unobtainium and it's just not going to work ever. So people, we actually interact with the contract manufacturers, not so much. I think we tend to be brought in at the beginning and used to kind of throw stuff over the fence. So a lot of what we do is do early feasibility, and we will write really detailed performance reports on what the limit of technology is. What's the limit of CMOS imaging, of electron multiplying CCD, radiation detection, infrared imaging, spectroscopy for in vitro devices, microscopy, and we will write, okay, if this thing is going to hit the market, it needs to achieve X, Y, and Z. And those requirements will often get passed back down to right down the end, right to the device qualification when it's going through manufacture. So that end of line QC test will have to tick off against those things. So I guess we as a company, we will definitely work much more with the ideas people, and we will try and mold that idea into something that can be taken forwards. But I think, we were talking a little bit about failures and this tick box. So what's the first tick box? I've actually forgotten who said this now. We were talking about, there's so many ticks that need to be. It's much more like a kind of a set of boxes, and you've got to have a tick in every box. And if you've got a cross in one of those boxes, it's sterilization, transport, any of that stuff, it's game over. And maybe what you were talking about, Mike, there's sort of one of the kind of the unwritten rules of compliance is if you don't test it, it doesn't work. I don't care how trivial it is, it just doesn't work. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do in-house, that we can do. So we talked about EMC, we can do testing here in our lab, and somebody gives us a thing, we can say, okay, here are all the things that's going to go wrong with that. And we have formalisms around that, right? We've got design failure mode analysis, process failure mode analysis for manufacture. We've got all of the risk analysis. We've got the patient risks and hazards. All of this stuff is known to us in the community. And a lot of the people who are designing this, who don't have that experience, don't have that, they just don't have that behind them and don't know the value of it. Whereas everyone on this call knows the value of that. And that's another area where people like us who really understand that tech can say, okay, here's 436 ways this thing can go wrong. Of that, 36 of those are going to impact your user experience, patient safety, overall performance.
I invited Nathan to join our little Brady Bunch square for a couple of reasons, and one of them is he's brand new. He just joined us this week, and he wants to make something. And so where have you started, Nathan, and what kind of design questions do you have, and have you heard themes that you've had rattling around in your head as an entrepreneur?
So I started with pretty much an idea.
What are you making?
So it's an MRI guided endovascular device, and it's an electrical device. It's almost like putting an antenna inside of the body. And so right now I'm sort of engaging contract manufacturers, but I have not really considered design for compliance. I'm certainly hearing a lot of different things. I've really been trying to speak with clinicians and physicians, to understand the clinical needs. But yeah, it's certainly, like you said, Joe, you're getting hit with so many different things, and it's like, where do you start? Like, what would I present you with, Phil? If, do I present you with a drawing, a schematic? Would you need an early prototype?
Normally it's a conversation like this, right? So you've already, in my brain, a number of things have just gone off. So you said it's something inside the body, it's an antenna, it's MR. So I'm already thinking MR safety, I'm thinking biocompatibility, I'm thinking, what kinds of materials, what kinds of connections, what's external, are there any umbilicals, or is that going to be completely remote? Is there going to be any kind of pickup system there? What are the requirements of the pickup system? What does that need to comply with? So you give me, and that's a conversation, and then I go to you. Okay, I would talk to MR physicists and find out what their safety requirements are. Talk to Andre if you need to look at biocompatibility and materials. I'm sure he's got a big portfolio of materials that can go inside the body. It's what I was saying earlier. That's leveraging from what other manufacturers are already using, things that are already qualified. The other thing about something that goes inside the body is how long is it going to go inside the body? Because your cytotoxicity test is going to have to be qualified against the duration that material is inside the body. So it can be relatively toxic if it's only going to be in for 10 minutes. But if that's something that's going to be in the patient for, so something like a contrast pin that's used in radiography, that's going to be in there for 2 or 3 days, then that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Couple things. One is he's a PhD, ladies and gentlemen. Second is about 45 minutes into this call, that little segment where you just kind of, well, here are the things that that's a segment right there. I mean, the things you rattled off, most of which went over my head, were a great example of I had no idea. And that for your discipline, it's like, oh my God, here are 15 things you got to know.
This happens all the time, and I have to say, sometimes I sit in a room where we're actually quite advanced. Somebody tells me a thing, and I just go, WTF. How did you not think of that until now? And I guess, so how do you start, Joe? I think you start by talking to people. You start by sharing enough information that you can leverage off experts, but not giving too much information away so that you lose your IP, Nathan. I don't know whether that was helpful or scary.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I definitely want to follow up after with you. So.
Yeah, and then getting into even other things, it made me think of, are there any sharp points in this? How are you going to sterilize it? How are the hospitals going to handle it? What are they going to put it in? Kind of material do I have to worry about? Biocompatibility. How are you going to ship it? How many are you going to do? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff besides what Phil was talking about you're going to have to worry about too that are going to affect what you're doing with.
And I have a question for Nathan, and that is, do you have any Valium at home?
Sorry?
Do you have any Valium at home? I'm thinking after this call, you're going to need to kind of get down a little bit, because I'm overwhelmed and I'm not you, and I get to just hang up and be like, I hope he figures it out. Sanjeev, you offered something.
Yeah, so the question I had was, when you're doing a startup like Nathan, you're doing, what do you do in regards to getting funds? Because if you're working on your prototype and you're doing the compliance and everything, right, you don't have enough funds to go in and do the compliance. Otherwise, you really need to get a prototype quickly so that you can get your funds, so you can get your funding raised. How do you manage this? I mean, I've gone through it, but how do you manage it?
Well, yeah, so that's something I'm trying to figure out right now. So I've made simple prototypes myself, but I'm engaging with contract manufacturers to get a rough price so that I can then go get funding, based off of some of these estimates.
Nathan, that's the question. Now, you've made the prototype. Does compliance become an issue? Because when you go to FDA, they're going to come back and say, well, you never designed this right from the beginning, right? Because you didn't take compliance into effect. So where's this balance? And maybe one of you guys, Phil and Andre, you guys can answer that.
Yeah, I'd like to, because actually, Sanjeev, we get that a lot from clients that come to us and say they've got this great idea for a product or maybe some initial concepts and so forth. And they say, but I need to get funding. And so you have to relate to the fact that if they don't have the funding, you're not going to have a product. So in order to assist them in that, what we typically do is we do come up with a conceptual design that may not address, the design for manufacture, design for compliance. And although those are all necessary, you got to have the realization that you have to have the money to go forward. And so therefore, what we've done is we've done conceptual drawings. We produce conceptual prototypes with just rough estimates of what the end product may look like, just as an assist, kind of as a visual aid, in essence, for them to go forward and get the funding. But it's certainly not a product that then would go into design. Then you have to go into the next step. That would be actually before an alpha stage in the design. It has to be really a conceptual product to get them to allow to explain their product for the funding. At least that's the way we've approached it with a number of clients.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because I completely agree. So what you're trying to do is increase value and decrease risk as much as possible for the minimum amount of cash. I mean, okay, time. I'm guessing, Nathan, you're willing to donate as much as you've got, but it's all about cash. So what can you do? I mean, and we've done. And should I admit this? You're going to put this on YouTube, right, Joe?
Oh yeah, it's all going on.
We've done experiments with radioactive materials in chicken, in ham. We've done all sorts of different experiments, just trying to produce data that's as realistic as possible, that you can show your funders, or you can show your family who are going to lend you some cash to get it to the next stage. Thinking about MR, that's so hard to get that into the clinic. But of course, there's preclinical MR. If you can, I think it was Jörg earlier who was, Lurk was saying, get it into a university. If you can get a friend in a university who's got a preclinical MR system, you can put your widget in that. You can put your widget in other materials, plastics, water, chicken, ham, even an animal if you can get it through ethics, and just get as much information about the efficacy of your device. And that at that point, I wouldn't be worried particularly about compliance, but I'd already start thinking, it's as Jan says, I'm already thinking about biocompatibility at this point, because if you're making this thing out of, I don't know, out of lead, right? And I know you're not, but it's already game over. So you're already starting to think about that. So there's different things which are important at different times. So you're at the point now where you're trying to increase the value, increase your confidence, and lowering that risk. And then behind that is coming things like sterilizability, biocompatibility, design for manufacture creeping up behind that. But they all have to come up more or less at the same time.
I know that you assembled, especially those of you who've been on calls before, know that I'm not shy about expressing my inner feelings. And I just need to say, I love you guys. I really do. I just, because just this group we've assembled, I feel like a blanket is covering me, as though if I had any question, I could ask someone and we will figure it out. So I'm so grateful for everyone. That's number one. Number two, Rick wrote, because things are financially driven, that's typically why Phil and Rick are not often brought in at the very beginning of a project. And the third is just, I can't help but be amused to rhetorically ask Nathan, have you gotten your $39 a month worth out of your subscription so far?
Oh, absolutely. So
okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah, I'm very happy to
Good.
Be part of this community.
I have a question from Nicholas. He's not a member yet, so I'm going to read his question. And he asks, do any of the panel members have advice on how to protect your technology from being reverse engineered? Are there any tips or tricks to prevent competitors for discovering how your device works? And
great question.
Do you have a reply for that, Andre?
Actually, yeah. In fact, some of the major work you do, you spend more time masking than creating if you've got something that you really want to protect. And there's a number of things that you could do in electronics and in other ways to do your best. All you're doing is putting roadblocks up. You can never take away the ingenuity of somebody to reverse engineer or forensically determine a product. But nevertheless, as part of the design process, if there is that kind of know-how that needs to be protected, you've got to build it in by using a number of techniques.
I wanted to have Jonathan pop back in because I know IP and all of this is a little bit part of your domain. How would you answer, Nicholas?
I mean, I think Andre said it well. There's a lot of different techniques, from baking onto the circuitry so that it's unrecoverable, unimaginable, to hiding things in certain areas, building it into the design, or going straight up front with some old school, very practical solutions like that spring that I was talking about, where you're just forcing everyone to be in a different cost of goods category. I love doing that kind of stuff because it's so basic and yet it's so effective, because if you multiply it times 20 or times 10, you can see that a $20 increase in the cost of goods is going to put you out of the market, especially if you're dealing with consumer products.
Jan, your mic's still on and I'm inviting you back on screen. You just wrote something here about single-use devices. What were you saying for Nicholas?
Oh, there's a lot of people out there right now that are actually reprocessing single-use devices to use them another time. And there's a lot of tricks being put into devices to help keep that from happening. So the reprocessing people tend to get around that after a while, but it's, so I'm seeing it not only on the new stuff, but even on single-use items to keep them from being reused, which bothers me, but I guess it's being done because it's so much cheaper for people.
Nick follows up with this question. He says, as an early stage company with a small team aiming to enter the medical diagnostic market, does the panel have suggestions where would be the best place to find technical people to join the team?
Here.
That's so, Nicholas, I'll ask you to type in a follow-up, and that is, are you for some reason looking to hire W-2s as full-time employees, or looking for consultants, much like many assembled here? So I'll leave you to answer that. We haven't seen him here in a while, so I wanted to get him on screen to say hi from France. It should be on. Oh, it's not on. Attendee. Okay, there. Unmute. Say hi.
Hey, hi everybody. So yeah, calling from France.
You had a webinar of your own this morning. What were you covering?
Yeah, this morning we covered. I'm covering mainly the EU market. So CE marking for medical devices related to the new regulation, the MDR and the IVDR, so in vitro diagnostic or medical device regulation. And we covered the GSPR, which is the general safety and performance requirements, which are also maybe useful for your design compliance thing, because we covered the fact that every project should mainly start by this list when you are going for the CE marking, because it tells you exactly what are the elements you have to comply with to show compliance to the market. And I had a lot of clients that called me or asked us to join the team when the design was already frozen. And at the end, we couldn't do anything because there was a lot of requirements that were not met. And you had to do tests again. They had to perform a new biocompatibility test, etc., etc. So the idea was to show what is the GSPR, what are those requirements for the CE marking, and also how to use them during a design project. So how to use them from the beginning, and not wait that everything is frozen and everything is ready to be sold on the market before to really fill that as just a document to fill. So because some people are thinking, oh, it's just a document that we have just to fill and then to send to the market. But in reality, it can be really a guidance for you to be sure to place to finalize your project quickly and to be sure to cover all the requirements for the EU market.
Yeah, can I? So I completely agree with that, and we so often people bring us in to fill out these checklists, and they're completely useless at the end.
Yeah.
But they're only useful at the beginning if you have the people experienced enough who will know how to design for that compliance. And again, you know, it's everybody on this call, Jan, Andre, Jonathan, who can. So to answer the previous call about where do you hire these people from, hiring really experienced medical device professionals is actually really, really expensive. So I think there's a balance, and I've seen that with some of our clients, of getting bright graduates who, and a lot of medical devices is just attention to detail, right? It's about making sure that everything on the checklist is absolutely done right. So getting bright graduates and experienced consultants like us to come in and guide them and say, okay, right, and review it. So external review as well is something that's absolutely critical in the design of a medical device. Having somebody come in and go, okay, great guys, you know, you've achieved all of this. This is everything that's on the checklist, but you haven't really. It's very easy, right, Munir, to just tick a box and go, oh programmability. We've lost Jose now, but penetration testing. Yeah, we did basic penetration testing of the wireless system, but somebody external comes in and says.
Yeah, what we also saw, and it's also what we try to explain during the webinar, is the fact that those checklists, some people are used to see that, but they are used also to fill them automatically. So it means that, okay, I'm complying with the ISO 13485, which is the quality management system, so I put that everywhere on the checklist. I comply with the risk management, which is ISO 14971, so I put that on the list. But when you are making a deep dive on their compliance to some ISO or some requirements, you see that no, they are not really complying, they are missing a lot of things. But it's like a trend of fashion to put those ISO because it looks good and it's really what is answering some of the requirements. But at the end, they think that the auditors or notified bodies will not find that or will not look at that, which is really a big mistake. So there is, as you mentioned, from somebody that has no experience to somebody that has experience, with a lot of examples, a lot of projects, there can be really a really added value to have somebody with experience, because at the end they already had this situation with a lot of notified bodies or auditors or inspectors, and they know exactly what kind of question they will ask, and they know exactly how to answer those questions, instead of resolving a non-conformance and then to have again to start from zero, because yeah, you have to comply with it anyway. They will not let you pass without complying with it. So there is a lot of things that, if I can say, regulatory part or compliance part can help with, but involve them early in the project, not when everything is already discussed and everything is already decided, because then you will be surprised. If you have a strong regulatory person on the team, they will stop you before you really jump on this on this audit or on this compliance matter. But if you have an experienced, not a non-experienced person, they will maybe let you go, not knowing really what is happening after that.
Yeah, and the trouble is, if you have people like us, so I mean, not all auditors are, are quite switched on. But for example, the first thing that I would do as an external reviewer is go to the risk and hazard analysis, and then look at a mitigation, and then verify that that mitigation has been passed through the design. And 9 times out of 10, you can trip them up. I mean, you can just get non-conformities like this. And that's the experience. That's the value of having people like us who know how the auditors are going to look at this, how the notified body is going to evaluate it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Just to add to that, maybe circling back to the original question that you had, Joe, like where do you start with this stuff? Kind of repeating a little bit of what's been said, you want to start with somebody or a group of people who have a lot of experience in doing something as close to what you're trying to do as possible. So you definitely don't want to have people who have no medical device experience. That's a mistake. That's going to hurt you. But even within medical devices, there are many types of medical devices. And if you're developing a syringe like Mike, you don't want to come to somebody like Boltype. That's not what we specialize in. If you're doing, a connected wireless medical device, you may not want to go to a company that's great at doing syringes. So try to find either somebody or a group of people who do products that are as close to what you're doing, because they've been through the pitfalls. Number 2, with that person or group, put together a plan. So that plan is going to include something like the checklist that was mentioned just now, and that's a great mechanism that you should be doing early in the process, so that you understand what are all the different things we're going to have to do from a regulatory point of view, from a usability point of view, from a compliance point of view, from a 6601 and FCC and EMC and biocompatibility. Figure out what are those standards that you're going to have to meet and what are the risks associated with that. And then from that, have a plan to de-risk each one of those things. So how am I going to de-risk FCC? Well, okay, I'm going to try to get my circuits to the test lab as early as possible. How am I going to de-risk biocompatibility? I'm going to select components or materials that have been used in competitive products where they have a good profile. How am I going to de-risk usability? Well, I'm going to do prototypes as early as possible and put them in front of the users. Like, what's that? Put together your plan early, and your best bet at doing that well is to work with a person or a group who have done something as similar to what you're trying to do as possible. So there are a lot of great people out there. They're going to have different flavors of expertise. You have to do some of the homework up front to find who are the people that have done something as close to what I'm going to do as possible. That's my advice.
For a moment there, we saw Peter Harris's forehead. Peter joined us this week as well. So Peter, if you want to give us your whole face and introduce yourself, this is the time to do it. You seem to be having some technical difficulties with his forehead. Please stand by.
Can I, while we're waiting for Peter, maybe I'll just add to what Jose was saying, because that plan is exactly what you need when we're coming back to investment and funding, because you can put costs against that. And that's the other thing that I see is people who've got, we've got 100K, it doesn't matter whether it's dollars or pounds now, to develop this device. And as soon as somebody says that to me, when we're going to launch it, as soon as they say that to me, I know they haven't explained to the investor what it actually takes to get that device to market. And you know that they're going to let them down. They're going to fail badly, and it could be the best technology in the world. But if you can produce a cost against that plan, then you can get buy-in to it. The chances of success are so much higher.
While we're waiting for Peter, Nicholas, I went ahead and made your microphone live because you had a follow-up. So go ahead and ask, please, Nicholas. Nick?
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. So it's just kind of a follow-up about where to find people who would be a good technical fit for an early stage team. It's just kind of like at the moment I've got myself and a few academic advisors working on the project, but I'm looking at expanding the team and bringing on some more technical people in the near future.
So you have a budget to hire a full-time technical lead?
We haven't got a budget yet. We're currently in the process of applying for funding.
So anyone on the call who wants to work for free as a technical lead at Nicholas's company, there's an opportunity for you. Yeah, I would say that most people want compensation, so that's going to be a thing.
Well, I mean, I think if you're an early stage startup, the other thing that you've got is equity. And, it may or may not be some of the people on the screen or in this group, but, if you can, okay, at this stage of your company, you just have to sell, right? So you're trying to sell your vision to co-founders, you're trying to sell your vision to investors, you're trying to sell, to the community around you. So if you've got something that's really compelling, then you may be able to sell that idea to somebody who is interested in being a co-founder and is willing to put in sweat equity, right? Work for equity and be a co-founder. And if I think, in a startup, it's really important to have a good technical experienced co-founder as part of that team. So that might be what you need to do. As far as, where you're going to find them, again, if you know the category that you're going into, LinkedIn's a great place, kind of like look for, I don't know, product managers or directors of engineering at companies that are in that space. Try to talk to them. If nothing else, you're going to learn from them. But if you pique their curiosity and get them really excited about what you're building, they may be willing. Maybe they're at a stage in their career where they can take some financial risk. They've got a little, nest egg or whatever, so they can do that, and they'll be able to join you. But it's about going out there, knocking, selling, talking to people.
Nicholas, if/when you choose to join us, you'll get immediate access to the entire roster of members here in MDG Premium. Peter Harris's entire face has shown up, and we'd like to meet him for the first time.
Good morning, guys.
Yourself.
Good morning, guys. This is Peter Harris. Is my audio coming through?
It is. It sounds as though you're from Australia.
Close, South Africa originally.
All right. Well, I was in the right hemisphere.
I have spent a lot of time living and operating in Australia.
And now you live in Washington State with me, but about as far away from where I am as possible.
Yes, and that's not as bad as it sounds. Actually, we're now we are
on my own call. You've got some nerve. That's a joke.
I missed it. I've been talking.
Tell us what you do, please.
We're in Washington.
Pacific Beach, Washington, and that's north of Aberdeen, Hoquiam on the beach coast.
Jan's moving north from Oregon into the very bottom of Washington. Camas, is that where you're going?
I'm moving from California to southern Washington, yes.
Well, you'll find the weather is quite different.
Yes, I am looking forward to water and some rain.
That you will have.
And a little bit of coolness.
That you will have.
Peter, what do you do for a living?
My background is in medical devices for many years, my entire career, actually. And along the way, I invented and patented an obesity surgery known as laparoscopic gastroapplication. If anyone's interested, you can Google LGP, and I invented that. I've just recently sold the 9 seminal patents that I created for that.
Can I ask you, because my knowledge of this is quite cursory, the notion of laparoscopic surgery is something that I somewhat understand. Did you just say that you're the guy who first conceived having laparoscopic surgery?
No, not that globally, no. No, what I conceived was the concept of using laparoscopic surgery for an obesity volume reduction surgery on the stomach body, and doing that surgery externally to the stomach. In other words, not puncturing the stomach wall at all, and that's done by means of a laparoscopic approach.
That's fascinating.
And yeah, and it worked very well.
I think we're going to need to line you up for a week in August to tell us about it.
I'd be happy to do that. It's part of my history and background now. But sure, yeah, always like talking about it.
Phil, as we hit the 80-minute mark, I find that by 90 people are like, get me off this call. So let's spend these waning minutes with you and bring it on home as far as our very circuitous conversation. We started with design for compliance and finished this sentence. Guys, if you remember nothing else from this call, when we're talking about design for compliance,
when we're talking about design for compliance, get the experts involved early. And that doesn't mean get us in, for 8 weeks at the beginning. Just pick up the phone, have a conversation like we did with Nathan. Let's have a 5-minute call.
Yeah.
That doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Real time costs money, but just getting an opinion from people who've been there before and who felt the pain is worth. Well, what's the current?
$39 a month.
$39 a month. There you go.
That would be reasonable. We have the channel called "What Do You Need?" and perhaps everyone who joins says, "I'm working on this." From all of your functional expertise, what would be the first thing you'd have me think about? That would be really interesting. In fact, even those of us who've been around in the community for, will be a year in October. Oh, no, actually, well, who knows when I started. The point is, we could still do that. And I think it'd be a fun exercise for everyone. Beyond the basically call Phil, and you did a great job, like you say, with Nathan, where you just said, well, these are the things that I thought about, and you listed more things that, so go back to the 45-minute mark of this recording and hear what those were. I guess the cases are as broad as that, and you would have spouted 15 different questions had, Nicholas told us what he's building.
Absolutely, and it's exactly what Jan said. People come to me and say, we're making X. What do you think? And I can say, I have no idea. I have no experience of doing that, which is what you were saying, Jose. So go to the people who know what they're doing in that area. Medical devices is as diverse as any kind of technology. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll just say I'm really no idea, and I actually don't know who to forward you to. I mean, I probably know almost as many people as you do, Joe. Maybe not quite as many, but I can usually find, some expertise, if not direct them directly to that person, but find a stepping stone. And I think that's what these networks are really useful for. When so you're not in a vacuum. So I should be very interested to know how, why did Nathan find the MDG? Whether you can get him back. Because for us who've been in it, we know the value of community. We know the value of from my perspective, of regulatory equality, of human factors. But I think to have the to have the foresight to realize that you need to reach out early, because it's very easy to be focused on your thing. And maybe, I don't know, Peter can probably talk to that, but
yeah, how did you find us and why did you join, Nathan?
Yeah, so I was looking for, experts, and so I found this group on LinkedIn, and I reached out to Joe after I signed up, and it looked like a welcoming community, and with all of the experts that you need early on. So I've been recently I got a Nsf Phicorp Grant, and so I've been reaching out to a lot of people and just trying to figure out a path forward. So
how much is your grant for?
It's a small grant, so it's $30,000 for customer discovery related activities. So it's not for product development.
And how do you plan on it? What are you planning to do for customer discovery? What have you conceived so far? Is that a way of saying voice of the customer, see what they need kind of thing?
Yes, it's asking open-ended questions. In our case, interventional cardiologists, endovascular surgeons, and interventional radiologists.
Okay.
And so you could consider it maybe need finding.
Well, maybe we should talk, and I won't be the guy to siphon those 30,000 away from you, but I probably know someone who would be a good place to park 5 or so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the grant is for funding travel expenses, but right now, since we can't travel,
yeah, you can read. Where are you located?
I'm in Fremont, California.
Okay, fair enough. And how far away is that from you, Jonathan?
It's not close.
Oh, California, just kind of get I know the shape of and I know San Diego's at the bottom.
Well, Stanford is close to you, and they have a lot of good stuff that helps with that. Stanford and
absolutely.
Even the Mountain View Hospital over there has a lot of people that hated Stanford and went there. So that would, I know those guys are pretty good.
Let me do a quick check and see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm right near Stanford and Berkeley, so and UCSF. So I've been sort of talking with people there, and
I thought you said Fremont. That's up in Northern California. You're in Southern California? Sorry. I do know California, Joe. I'm born here.
No, Northern California. So yeah, Stanford, Berkeley, yeah, UCSF.
So next week on the big show is Mr. Larry Stevens, who is an 11-year FDA employee veteran, and he is going to talk to us about the mindset of an FDA employee, which I think will be a fascinating study of psychology.
Yeah, is he going to do it on the auditor or the people that train the auditors who get pissed at the auditors all the time?
I don't know. Mrs. Harris is in the frame. We need to meet her.
Helen? You walk past the camera. You get it.
Hey, everybody. Hey, just one question for you, ma'am. What's it like to live with Peter?
Oh, she left.
He left.
Did you get that, Helen?
That's the answer.
What's it like to live with Peter?
What's the question?
What's it like to live with Peter?
A laugh a minute.
Is it? Did you guys meet in South Africa?
No, in Bellevue, Washington.
Is that right?
Yeah. We are both refugees from Bellevue some years ago, and we moved to the beach here to get away from traffic and other issues. And so we're living.
There's absolutely no traffic in Bellevue. You should revisit it.
Now, yeah.
Ask if they want to meet Charlie.
I think this draws this week to a close. So next week is Larry, and in 2 weeks' time, Nick and Michelle are going to talk about reimbursement and regulatory, two great tastes that taste great together. So Phil, you know, one of the rules we have here is you can show up on weeks where you're not presenting.
And every week I intend to come, but
every week there's some reason, something more important. We get it.
Well,
I get it from my kids.
It used to be we had a great pub across the road, but it's been closed for 13 weeks now, so I have to think of another excuse.
All right, fair enough. Another great week, people. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Phil, especially, and we'll see you online.
Bye.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Welcome, newcomers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.